Let me start with something that might sound completely backwards. The most confident people you've ever met, the ones who walk into a room and somehow shift the energy, the ones who speak and you just believe them, the ones who close deals and build empires and seem to have this unshakable core, most of them will tell you the same thing if you ask them honestly. They'll tell you they're not trying to feel confident. They're not standing in front of a mirror repeating affirmations. They're not psyching themselves up. They're not searching for some magical feeling of certainty before they act. They've just stopped caring so much about what happens next. And that right there is the thing nobody teaches you. Because the entire self-help industry, the entire culture of personal development, has been selling you a lie. The lie is that confidence is a feeling you need to find before you can perform, that you need to believe in yourself before you can do great work, that somewhere inside you, there's a switch labeled confidence, and once you flip it, everything changes. I bought that lie for years, and it cost me. I'm Leon J. I've been in sales, I've built software, I've written code and I've written proposals, and I've sat across from people trying to convince them that what I had was worth their money and their time. And for a long time, I thought the reason some conversations went well and others didn't was because of my confidence level. I thought on the good days I had it, on the bad days I didn't. And so I spent enormous amounts of energy trying to manufacture feeling, trying to feel confident, instead of just doing the work. It took me a long time, and a lot of books, and a lot of painful conversations with myself, to realize that I had the entire model backwards. Confidence isn't the cause of great performance, it's the byproduct. And the thing that actually produces both great performance and the feeling of confidence is something much simpler and much harder. It's outcome independence. Let me explain what I mean. Outcome independence is the ability to fully invest yourself in what you're doing right now. This conversation, this pitch, this piece of work, this creative act, without attaching your identity, your self-worth, your emotional state, to whatever happens after you're done. It doesn't mean you don't care. It doesn't mean you have no goals. It doesn't mean you're passive or indifferent or checked out. It means you've decoupled your sense of who you are from the scoreboard. Naval Ravikant talks about this in a way that cuts right to the bone. He says that desire is a contract you make with yourself to be unhappy until you get what you want. Think about that. Every time you fixate on an outcome, I need this deal to close, I need this client to say yes, I need this video to go viral, I need this person to validate me, you've just signed a contract with yourself that says, I will not be okay until this external thing happens. And the moment you sign that contract, you've already lost, because now your energy isn't going into the work, it's going into anxiety about the result, it's going into performance. It's going into trying to look like someone who deserves the outcome, rather than being someone who's fully absorbed in the process. This is not philosophy. This is neuroscience. Let me take you inside your brain for a minute, because what happens neurologically when you attach to outcomes is genuinely fascinating and genuinely destructive. Your brain has two systems that are constantly competing for dominance. The first is your prefrontal cortex, the executive center, the part that plans, reasons, creates, connects ideas, reads social cues, adapts in real time. This is the part of your brain that does your best work. When you're in a great conversation and you just know what to say next, that's your prefrontal cortex firing on all cylinders. When you're solving a complex problem and the solution suddenly appears, that's your prefrontal cortex. When you're in a negotiation and you can feel the other person's hesitation and you adjust your approach without even thinking about it, prefrontal cortex. The second system is your amygdala, the threat detection center. This is the part of your brain that evolved to keep you alive on the savannah. It scans for danger. It triggers your fight or flight response. It floods your system with cortisol and adrenaline. And it has one very important feature that most people don't understand. When the amygdala activates, it suppresses the prefrontal cortex. This is called amygdala hijack, a term coined by Daniel Goleman, and it's not subtle. When your amygdala takes over, your IQ effectively drops. Your creativity shuts down. Your ability to read people diminishes. Your working memory shrinks. You become reactive instead of responsive, rigid instead of flexible. Now here's the critical connection. What activates your amygdala? Threat. And what does your brain perceive as a threat? Anything that endangers your survival. And in the modern world, your brain has expanded survival to include your social status, your self-image, your ego, your identity. So when you walk into a sales meeting and you've told yourself, I need this deal. If I don't close this, I'm a failure. If this doesn't work out, it means I'm not good enough. You've just told your amygdala that your survival is on the line. And your amygdala does exactly what it's designed to do. It takes over. It pushes your prefrontal cortex offline. And now you're trying to do the most complex, creative, interpersonal work of your life with half your brain shut down. This is why desperate salespeople never close. This is why job candidates who need the job the most often perform the worst in interviews. This is why the person who's terrified of being rejected on a date comes across as awkward and needy. It's not because they lack ability. It's because their attachment to the outcome has literally compromised their cognitive function. You're not underperforming because you lack confidence. You're underperforming because you care too much about the wrong thing. And the solution isn't to try harder to feel confident. The solution is to stop making the result a referendum on your worth as a human being. Let me give you a concrete example from my own life. Years ago, I had a meeting with a potential client, a big one, the kind of opportunity that could have changed the trajectory of what I was building, and I prepared. I prepared extensively. I knew the material. I knew their pain points. I had a solution that genuinely fit, but walking in, I was terrified. Not terrified of the people in the room, terrified of what it would mean if they said no. Because I had made this meeting into a verdict on me. If they said yes, it meant I was legitimate. If they said no, it meant everything I'd been working on was worthless. And you know what happened? I was mediocre. I wasn't terrible. I didn't fall apart, but I was stiff. I was performing instead of connecting. I was so busy monitoring their reactions. Are they interested? Did that land? Do they think I'm credible? That I couldn't actually be present. I couldn't listen. I couldn't adapt. I couldn't be the version of myself that actually knows this material cold and genuinely cares about solving their problem. They passed. A few months later, I had a similar meeting, similar stakes. But something had shifted in me. I'd been reading, I'd been reflecting. And I remember making a conscious decision before walking in. I'm going to give this everything I have, and whatever they decide is their business, not mine. My job is to show up fully. Their job is to decide if it's a fit. Same material, same level of preparation, but completely different energy. I was relaxed. I was curious. I asked better questions because I wasn't afraid of the answers. I listened, genuinely listened, because I wasn't rehearsing my next line in my head. I even pushed back on something they said, respectfully, because I wasn't trying to please them. I was trying to serve them. They said yes. And here's the thing, if they had said no, I would have been fine. Not because I didn't want the deal. I wanted it badly, but because I had separated the outcome from my identity. The deal was the deal. I was still me. That's outcome independence. And it doesn't just change how you feel, it changes how you perform. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi spent decades studying what he called flow, that state where you're completely absorbed in what you're doing, where time disappears, where your performance peaks and the work feels almost effortless. And one of his most important findings, which I think is consistently overlooked, is about what allows flow to happen. Flow doesn't come from confidence. Flow comes from total absorption in the task at hand. And total absorption is only possible when you're not splitting your attention between the task and your anxiety about the outcome. He found that people who entered flow states most consistently shared a specific psychological trait. They were autotelic. That's a term he used that means they did things for the intrinsic value of doing them, not for external rewards. The rock climber who climbs because she loves the movement, not because she's trying to prove something. The surgeon who operates with total focus because the act itself is meaningful, not because he's thinking about his reputation. The chess player who's lost in the position on the board, not calculating how this tournament result will affect his ranking. Autotelic people outperform, not because they don't care about results, many of them are fiercely competitive, but because in the moment of performance, the result isn't what they're focused on. They're focused on the process. And that focus unlocks the full bandwidth of their prefrontal cortex. This is the same principle. Outcome independence isn't apathy. It's the strategic decision to put all your cognitive resources into the present moment instead of hemorrhaging them on future scenarios you can't control. Now let me address the objection I know some of you are already forming, because I can hear it. Lead on, this sounds great in theory, but I have bills to pay. I have targets to hit. I have a family depending on me. I can't just not care about outcomes. I hear you, and I want to be very clear. I am not telling you not to care about outcomes. I'm telling you not to let outcomes define you. There's a massive difference between, I want this deal to close because it would be great for my business, and I need this deal to close because if it doesn't, I'm a failure. The first is a preference. The second is an identity crisis waiting to happen. The first keeps your prefrontal cortex online. The second triggers your amygdala. The first allows you to adapt, pivot, read the room, be creative, be human. The second makes you rigid, desperate, and blind to what's actually happening in front of you. The Talmud has a profound teaching about this. It says that it's not your obligation to finish the work, but neither are you free to abandon it. Think about how liberating that is. You're not responsible for the outcome. You're responsible for the effort. You show up, you do the work, you give it everything you have, and then you release it. This isn't passive. This is the most active, engaged, committed way to work, because all of your energy is going into the work itself, not into managing your fear about what happens after the work is done. Here's another layer to this that I think is crucial, especially for anyone in sales, anyone building a business, anyone who's trying to put themselves out there in a world that doesn't always respond the way you want it to. When you're outcome dependent, when your emotional state rises and falls with every yes and every no, you create a brutal internal volatility that erodes you over time. One good day, you're on top of the world. One bad day, you're questioning everything. One client says yes, you feel like a genius. The next one ghosts you, you feel like a fraud. This is exhausting, and it's unsustainable. Because the math of any sales career, any entrepreneurial journey, any creative endeavor is that you will hear no far more than you hear yes. If every no is a blow to your identity, you will burn out. It's not a question of if. It's a question of when. But when you're outcome independent, something remarkable happens. Your emotional baseline stabilizes. You still feel the sting of rejection. You're human, not a robot, but it doesn't penetrate to the core. It doesn't make you question who you are. It becomes information, not indictment. That approach didn't resonate with that person. What can I learn? What can I adjust? And here's the paradox. This emotional stability actually makes you more attractive to the people you're trying to reach. Because people can sense desperation. They can feel when someone needs their approval, and it repels them. Not because they're cruel, but because neediness signals low value. It signals that you don't fully believe in what you're offering. If you did, you wouldn't need their validation to feel okay about it. Conversely, people are drawn to someone who's fully invested but emotionally unattached to the outcome. It reads as confidence. It reads as competence. It reads as someone who has something valuable and is offering it freely, without strings, without pressure, without the subtext of please save me by saying yes. So here's the irony: the thing that looks like confidence, the thing that people admire and respond to and want to buy from, isn't confidence at all. It's outcome independence. It's the quiet, settled energy of someone who knows what they bring to the table and doesn't need you to confirm it. Let me talk about how this applies beyond sales, because I think this principle is one of the most universally powerful mental shifts a person can make. Think about relationships. How many relationships have been destroyed by outcome dependence, by one person needing the other to behave in a certain way in order to feel okay about themselves? If you love me, you'll do this. If you don't respond in 2 hours, it means you don't care. If this relationship ends, I'm nothing. That's not love, that's hostage-taking. And it suffocates the other person because they can feel the weight of being responsible for your emotional survival. The people who build lasting, deep, nourishing relationships, and this is true in business too, not just romance, are the people who bring a full cup. They don't need the relationship to complete them. They're already complete. And because of that, they can show up generously, without keeping score, without constant anxiety about whether they're getting enough back. Think about creative work. How many artists, writers, entrepreneurs have been paralyzed by the need for their work to be received a certain way? If this video doesn't get views, I'm wasting my time. If this product doesn't sell, I'm not cut out for this. If people don't clap, the music isn't good. That kind of thinking kills creativity at the source. Because creativity requires risk. It requires showing something before you know if it's good. It requires putting an idea out there that might fail. And if your identity is tied to the outcome, the risk feels existential. So you play it safe. You copy what worked for someone else. You sand down every edge. And you produce something mediocre, not because you lack talent, but because your talent has been caged by your fear. Csikszentmihalyi found that the most creative individuals across every field, art, science, business, music, shared this trait of being able to work without constant reference to external validation. They were driven by the work itself, by curiosity, by the joy of solving a problem or expressing an idea. The recognition, when it came, was welcome but not required. And because of that freedom, their work was bolder, more original, more alive. Now, I want to give you something practical, because I'm not interested in just making you feel inspired for 20 minutes. I want to give you something you can actually use. Here are 4 practices, 4 specific, actionable things that will help you build outcome independence as a real daily skill. Not a concept, not a platitude, a skill. Practice number 1. Redefine your success metric before every engagement. Before you walk into a meeting, before you make a call, before you send that email, before you publish that piece of content, define success in terms of what you can control. Not I need them to say yes. Instead, success today means I asked 3 questions I've never asked before. Or, success means I was fully present for the entire conversation. Or, success means I made my best case and listened without interrupting. This is not lowering your standards. This is redirecting your focus to the inputs instead of the outputs. And it directly addresses the neurological problem I described earlier, because when your success metric is something you control, there's no threat. Your amygdala stays calm, your prefrontal cortex stays online, and you perform at your actual capacity. Anders Ericsson's research on deliberate practice supports this powerfully. He found that the highest performers in every field set process goals, not outcome goals. The violinist doesn't practice to sound confident. She practices to nail a specific passage at a specific tempo with a specific quality of tone. The surgeon doesn't go into the operating room trying to be great. He focuses on executing each step with precision. The outcome takes care of itself when the process is excellent. Do this before every significant interaction. Write it down if you need to. What is my process goal for this engagement? Make it specific, make it something you control, and then evaluate yourself against that standard, not against what the other person decided. Practice number 2. Run a daily evidence audit. This one is simple, but it's transformative if you do it consistently. At the end of every day, write down 3 things you did well. Not 3 outcomes that went your way, 3 things you actually did, 3 efforts, 3 moments of courage or discipline or creativity or connection. I followed up with a prospect even though I didn't feel like it. I asked a question that opened up a whole new dimension of the conversation. I spent 2 hours in deep work without checking my phone. I responded to a rejection with curiosity instead of self-pity. This practice rewires your brain over time. Literally, neuroplasticity research by people like Michael Csikszentmihalyi has shown that what you consistently pay attention to reshapes your neural architecture. If you spend every evening reviewing your failures, you're strengthening the neural pathways associated with inadequacy and threat. If you spend every evening reviewing your efforts and progress, you're strengthening the pathways associated with agency and growth. You're not ignoring problems. You're not pretending everything is great. You're simply training your brain to see the full picture instead of just the parts that hurt. And over time, this changes your baseline emotional state. You become more resilient, more stable, more capable of showing up the next day with energy instead of dread. This is directly connected to outcome independence, because when you can see your daily progress, when you have evidence that you're growing, learning, getting better, you don't need external results to feel okay. Your sense of forward motion comes from within, and that makes you anti-fragile against the inevitable rejections and setbacks that are part of any meaningful pursuit. Practice number 3, practice the 5-second release. This is a technique I've developed for myself, and it's changed how I operate in real time. When you notice yourself attaching to an outcome, when you feel the tightness in your chest, the racing thoughts, the internal monologue of "I need this to work," give yourself 5 seconds to acknowledge it and release it. Here's how you notice the attachment. You say to yourself silently, "I notice that I'm making this about my worth. I'm letting that go. My job is to be present." 5 seconds, that's all it takes. What you're doing is interrupting the amygdala hijack before it fully takes hold. Neuroscience research by Matthew Lieberman at UCLA has shown that the simple act of labeling an emotion, saying, "I notice I'm feeling anxious," activates the prefrontal cortex and dampens amygdala activity. It's called affect labeling, and it's one of the most powerful real-time emotional regulation tools we have. You don't need to meditate for an hour. You don't need to do breathing exercises in front of your client. You just need to notice, label, and redirect. 5 seconds, and then you're back in the present, focused on the person in front of you doing your actual work. The more you practice this, the faster it gets. Eventually, it becomes almost automatic. You feel the tug of outcome attachment, and your brain immediately redirects to process focus. It's a skill. It develops with repetition, and it's one of the highest leverage skills you can build. Practice number 4, create what I call a worth anchor. This one goes deeper, and it addresses the root cause of outcome dependence. The reason most people attach their worth to outcomes is that they don't have a stable internal sense of their own value. They need external confirmation, a closed deal, a compliment, a like, a share, a promotion, because without it, they're not sure they matter. So build your worth anchor. This is a written document, "I'm serious," write it down, that captures the evidence of your value independent of any specific outcome. It includes your skills, not vague things like "I'm a hard worker." Specific skills. I can read a client's hesitation and adjust my approach in real time. I can take a complex technical concept and explain it so a non-technical person understands and cares. I can build software that solves real problems. Your growth, where were you a year ago? Where are you now? What have you learned? What can you do today that you couldn't do then? Your impact, specific moments where you helped someone. Where your work made a difference, where your insight changed how someone thought about their problem. Your values, what do you stand for? What principles guide your decisions? What kind of person are you committed to being, regardless of what happens externally? Review this document regularly, not as an ego exercise, as a grounding exercise. Because when you have a clear, evidence-based understanding of your value, you don't need every interaction to confirm it. You walk into rooms differently, not with arrogance, with settledness. With the quiet security of someone who knows what they bring and isn't auditioning for approval. Let me tie this all together with something that might surprise you. I build AI tools. Specifically, I've built an AI-powered system designed to help salespeople grow, not just in technique, but in mindset, in self-awareness, in the ability to understand clients at a deep level and build relationships that last. And the entire philosophy behind that system is rooted in what I've been talking about today. Because here's what I've observed, both in myself and in every salesperson I've worked with. The technical skills are rarely the bottleneck. Most people know what to say, they've read the books, they've been to the trainings, they know the frameworks. The bottleneck is almost always internal. It's the desperation that leaks into their voice. It's the inability to listen because they're too busy worrying. It's the fear of rejection that makes them avoid the phone. It's the attachment to outcomes that makes every interaction feel like a test instead of a conversation. And you can't fix that with a better script. You fix it by changing the relationship between who you are and what happens to you. That's outcome independence, and it's trainable. It's not a personality trait you're born with. It's a skill you build through deliberate, consistent practice. The Talmud says something about this that I think about often. Who is rich? He who is happy with his lot. That's not about settling. That's not about lowering your ambitions. It's about finding your center of gravity inside yourself instead of in the hands of other people. When you're happy with your lot, not complacent, but grounded in the reality of what you have and what you've built, you pursue your ambitions from a position of strength rather than desperation. And everything you do is colored by that strength. I want to close with one more observation because I think it completes the picture. We live in a culture that worships confidence. Confident people get promoted. Confident people close deals. Confident people get followers and funding and featured in magazines. And so everyone is scrambling to figure out how to be confident, how to feel confident, how to project confidence. But what if confidence, as we typically understand it, is actually a trap? Because the conventional idea of confidence is, I believe this is going to work out. And the moment you tie your emotional state to that belief, you're fragile. What happens when it doesn't work out? What happens when the data contradicts your belief? You either crumble or you delude yourself. Neither is useful. Outcome independence offers something better than confidence. It offers equanimity. The ability to remain steady, engaged, creative, and effective regardless of what's happening around you. Not because you're certain of success, but because your sense of self doesn't depend on it. The samurai had a concept called mushin, no mind. It didn't mean thoughtlessness. It meant the absence of attachment to any particular outcome, including life and death. And paradoxically, the warrior who had released attachment to survival fought better than the one desperately clinging to life, because the one who clung was tight, reactive, predictable. The one who had let go was fluid, responsive, creative, and present. You don't have to be a samurai, but the principle applies to everything you do. Stop trying to feel confident. Start practicing being present. Stop making every interaction a verdict on your worth. Start making every interaction an opportunity to fully show up. Stop monitoring the scoreboard during the game. Play the game. The results will come. They always do for people who are fully invested in the process. Not because the universe rewards good vibes, but because the neuroscience is clear. When you remove the internal threat of outcome attachment, your brain functions at a higher level. You think more clearly, you listen more deeply, you create more freely, you connect more authentically, and all of those things make you more effective at whatever you're trying to do. Confidence is overrated. Outcome independence is the real superpower. And unlike confidence, which fluctuates with your mood, your last result, and whether you got enough sleep, outcome independence is a practice. It's something you can build, strengthen, and rely on every single day. It's not about finding the feeling, it's about doing the work. And when you do the work, fully, presently, without needing the world to applaud before you feel worthy, the feeling finds you. That is the shift, that is the edge, and it's available to you right now, not tomorrow, not when conditions improve, right now. If this resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and if you want to keep exploring these ideas together, follow along. I share new perspectives every week on sales, growth, mindset, and what it really takes to build something meaningful in a world that never stops changing. I'm Leon J. Keep showing up. I'll see you in the next one.